to another episode of Independence for America. At Independence for America, we tell the story of state and local independent candidates. Today, I have an old friend of mine, Laura Downs, who is on the city council in Falls Church, Virginia, which is right up the road from me in Arlington. How you doing today, Laura?
Good. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, really excited about this conversation because we kind of understand local politics, but we have people all over the country listening to this, and really want to encourage other people throughout the country to run for local and state office. So I always like to get a little bit of a background on people before we get started. So, tell me a little bit about your childhood and your family and, some of your influences growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. And the reason I bring that up is because, I would say my parents are probably a little bit more politically conservative. What changed for me is I attended George Washington University on a swimming scholarship. So that brought me out to the East Coast. And I was really grateful for that because I met a lot of people from all different backgrounds, and just it really opened my eyes to different ways of looking at issues and approaching things. So that's, I would say, I still obviously live on the East Coast. And I think some of that, your childhood does shape you. And I would say some of that is where I have sometimes a more moderate look at certain issues in our community, but also going to school on the East Coast and just meeting people, like I said, from all different backgrounds has also opened my eyes to different ways of looking at issues.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, a lot of, I also went to George Washington University for my master's degree, and that's where Laura and I met and everything. So please describe Falls Church to our listeners, kind of the good things, the bad things, the challenges, the opportunities, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I will say, just to sort of correct you a little bit, Mike, it's actually City Council for Falls Church City, Virginia. And that's a big difference because there's Falls Church City is an independent incorporated city. But there's also Falls Church that's part of Fairfax County, Virginia. So it is kind of confusing. And so, we always have to make sure we make that differentiation that it's Falls Church City. What's ironic about it, Mike, is Falls Church City is about the same exact size in area and square footage as George Washington University's campus. We're 2.1 square miles. And as I said, we're an independent city. We were part of Fairfax County, Virginia, but in 1948, we became separately incorporated. We have around 15,000 residents. We have our own school system. And that's one of the reasons it's a very attractive place to live is that we only have one elementary school. Well, we have a preschool, an elementary school, a middle school, and one high school. That's it. And we only have about 200 students per grade. So even though it's a public school, it's the size of a private school. And that school system is really one of the drivers in terms of why our property values are so high. You quite often hear people, I moved here for the schools. That's always one of the things that you hear. We do have our own police, but we do share fire services with Arlington County. And we also utilize Arlington County for our court system. So even though we are independent, we are small. And so we can't, we have to utilize Arlington services. And we have contracts with Arlington. The city council just approved, we just had an increase of what we have to pay to Arlington to have fire services and all that. So we have contracts with Arlington to pay for some of these additional services. We have our median household income is $150,000. We are a very highly educated city, and we are the smallest independent city in the state of Virginia if you look at square footage in terms of area. So I think, one of the things that we've been going through recently is you would often hear Falls Church City called like a sleepy little town. And it's really changed over the last, I would say since COVID. We have had 3 quite large mixed use developments go up. One includes a Whole Foods grocery store in the bottom, and that's at Washington Street, which is also some would call Lee Highway, and Leesburg Pike. And then we also have two other big mixed use developments. We have our own movie theater now and all this. So this is much different than the way Falls Church used to be, Falls Church City used to be, when it was really a smaller town. We didn't have much commercial going on in the city. I think we had a Red Lobster, a Burger King. That was about it. And so one of the reasons what we've really worked to improve this is because we do have one of the highest tax rates definitely in Virginia, if not the highest in terms of real estate taxes. And, it's hard to lower that tax rate if you don't have commercial revenue coming in. And so that was part of the reason that a lot of this commercial development has been going up. But that does, the community, some people who have lived here for 30 years don't love it because it has brought more traffic, more people to the city. So that's sort of the crux of what some of the things we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, change is always difficult, and there's always you're never going to make everybody happy, and people want things, but they have to sacrifice something too. So if you're going to have good schools, you have to have taxes to pay for the schools. So speaking of schools, tell us about your political journey, starting with the school board.
Yeah, so I, as you know, Mike, but people watching probably don't. My degree, my master's degree was in higher education administration. So once I graduated from George Washington University, I continued to work there for years, with my last position being overseeing student life at George Washington University. So, fraternities and sororities, student organizations, that sort of thing. Once my husband and I started a family, I stepped out of the workforce, but remained involved with, I was president of the Alumni Association at GW, still looking for ways to keep myself mentally challenged, and, then went sort of the PTA president route. And after I was done with PTA president, I really wanted a challenge. And so I decided to run for school board, and having that education background, I thought would help me a lot. Interestingly, it was the fall of 2019. So I was sworn in January of 2020. And 2 months later is a thing called COVID. And so It was a 4-year term. And for the first 2 years of my 4-year term, it was just COVID. So that was a very rough.
Some really tough decisions, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it was, I think, for how it's different, if you look at Arlington is obviously a much bigger area. Arlington, Virginia, and Fairfax is much, much bigger. These are our surrounding jurisdictions, as well as Alexandria. So all of these surrounding jurisdictions are much bigger. Their school boards are sort of anonymous in the sense that they can go grocery shopping without, being sort of accosted by, I quite often went grocery shopping in the middle of COVID with a mask on and stuff, and I would have people come up to me and sort of like some, were, constructive conversations, whereas other community members were upset and sort of took me to task in the middle of the grocery store. So I think that is one of the challenges in Falls Church City is we are such a small community. There's really no anonymity. And so, anywhere I go, I have to be prepared. And that's, I think it's great for our community members because it means that their publicly elected officials are very accessible. Right. But that was a trying time. And as everyone knows, and it was one of those things where, we wanted to support the teachers, making sure they were fully vaccinated. But by supporting the teachers, it meant we couldn't open when we wanted to open. And so, it was sort of that it was really a no-win situation, as everyone knows.
Yeah,
so,
many of the private schools were opening, even though the public schools were not. So that's challenging.
That's exactly right.
So first-time candidate back then, what were some of the things you had to do to win the election, and what was it competitive?
Mm-hmm. Again, I think because it's a small community, so much of it, well, I guess in all of politics, it's all about name recognition, right? And so a lot of that was having been, I also have, my husband and I have 4 boys. So, and ironically, at the time we ran, our elementary school is split into one is K through 2 is in one building, and the other building is 3 through 5. So I had the 4 kids in 4 different school buildings. I had one at the lower elementary, one at the upper elementary, one at the middle, and one at the high school. So not only was I elementary PTA president, I also had 4 kids who are, athletes and that sort of thing. So we were sort of a known name in the community, and that helped a lot,
Right.
I would say. And so, but I think I always tell people, I think it always comes down when you're campaigning is to the good old fashioned door knocking. It
Right.
really does, because I can't tell, it makes you a better leader, because you're more informed of what the issues are. But it also gets your name out there, and people remember all the time. Oh, I remember when you knocked on my door and we had that conversation about what have you. So what I think is great about that is that I always tell people, even if you don't have a large budget to spend on promotional materials and yard signs, like good old fashioned door knocking, I think does it every time for sure.
So in Virginia, all local elections are officially nonpartisan, meaning that there's no, R, D, or I next to anyone's name. But in many places in Arlington, the candidates still go through a nomination or endorsement process. So did that happen in Falls Church? And, what are your thoughts about the political parties and especially, school board and things like that?
Right. So, our both city council and school board are completely nonpartisan. And so much so that I follow Arlington a little bit, and I'm not trying to disparage Arlington, but we have no primaries. We have no endorsements. We have Falls Church City Democrats. Even the Falls Church City Democrats do not endorse anyone. We are completely nonpartisan. So what I think is so great about that is because you're not beholden to any political party as a public elected official. So, I often think, these things local politics don't often fall neatly in a Republican or a Democratic bucket, and so I'll give you a good example. Just recently, I think you often hear that, Democrats on a national level, Democrats like to tax people and spend money. But I would say that, our city council probably is mostly Democratic, but we're trying to get the tax rate cut because our tax rate is so high. So it just doesn't fit neatly in a Democratic or Republican bucket like that. And I do think that it's really important, that you can have these conversations. It enables me to always be able to change my mind, keep an open mind, because I don't have to follow a certain party's, platform.
Yeah, I mean, many of the parties have litmus tests, and when you were campaigning, were you ever asked, your positions on social issues or something? I mean, I'm sure a little bit as it relates to the school and stuff, but do they ever bring in national politics while you were knocking on doors?
I would say the closest, not on the city, not when I ran for city council. I would say the closest I think for school board is that, one of the things that did become a little political when our governor was elected, Governor Youngkin, because, I think there's a sort of feeling out there that the school systems in Northern Virginia are more liberal. And so
the schools were shut down longer too.
Right. That's right. And but in terms of, so I'll just put this out there. Like, I know some school systems in Northern Virginia have policies on equity and policies on how students who identify as transgender should be treated, that sort of thing. And that was one of the first things when the governor came in to talk about, that schools shouldn't have those policies. And that sort of gets tough because a locally elected school board is supposed to be running their school system. And so, I would say sometimes the schools, I would think that's the closest that we've gotten into with when the actual politics plays into it, is that sometimes you'll see, I think more so than state council, it's on the school side. Sometimes you'll see school systems in Northern Virginia not always be in alignment with what a Republican governor may want to see as priorities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it still does roll up. I mean, you still have to abide by the Virginia State Department of Education on a lot of things, and then they throw funding your way and things like that too.
Right.
So that is a little bit connected.
No, that's right. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think one of the original things was sort of an executive order. But then when it came through the Department of Education, then we had to, this. And when I say that, we're little, we tend to sort of latch on to what Arlington and Fairfax, how they want to approach these more social issues. Right. But, really, we are a Dillon Rule state. And that means, for those who don't know what Dillon Rule means, is that we only have powers that are expressly given to us by the state government. And so that's where the city council comes into play more is, I don't think this is really partisan, but a good example is we get complaints about speeders, people speeding through Falls Church City to get to Tyson's Corner. And we're not allowed to put up speed cameras unless they're in school zones, and that's per Richmond. So, we've been lobbying for years to try to let us have all localities have the ability to put up speed cameras where they want, but that hasn't ever passed. So that's, again, not so much a partisan issue as it is a state versus local issue.
So, all right, so you're on the school board for a while, and then tell us a little bit about your journey to the city council.
Well, that was a little bit unexpected. I was done with the school board, and it was a little. Because of COVID, also our teachers approved collective bargaining. It was a lot going on during my 4 years, and so I decided I'd take a break and not run for reelection. And then one of our city council persons had to resign for ethical reasons. And so the city council decided, I think at first the city council was going to appoint someone, and then they decided to have a special election. And so I had several city council people contact me and then encourage me to run because I was, a known name. I was respected in the community because I was school board chair for 2 years. So of the 4 years I was on school board, I was vice chair for 1 year and chair for 2 years. So 3 of the 4 years I was in leadership on the school board. And part of it also was that unlike, now, if you're elected in November, you're sworn in January. So you have some time to sort of learn the ropes. But in this special election, you win and literally the next week you're sworn in. And so
right.
The council people knew that I had somewhat, I had a lot of experience as a publicly elected official, and I could hit the ground running if I was elected. So I had always sort of thought about city council, but because my background was in education, that was the more natural fit for me. But then as I started thinking about it, I thought it would be like a really good mental challenge, and especially at this time where we're growing as a city. And when I had that encouragement from those city council members, I thought, I'm gonna try. So it was just me against another gentleman, just the two of us. And so I won, I think, with almost about 60% of the vote. And so so the whole thing was I was fulfilling the council person's term who resigned.
Right.
That term ends this December. So I'm running again this fall for a full 4-year term now.
All right. Well, congratulations. I think, it's good that you're going to step back into the ring and everything. So what about, just kind of the nuts and bolts of campaigning, fundraising and, getting a website, and did you have any debates or anything like that?
We did. We had 2 forums. One was put on by a local civics group, and then one was put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And I think if you're running that's for city council. If you're running for school board, the PTAs put on forums. But generally, they're not everyone plays nice. Generally they're pretty, it's more of just where do we see our city going, that sort of thing. And I would say fundraising, that's been interesting because 2 years, so right after COVID, when I still had 2 more years left of my term, we have staggered terms. So we have 7 people on city council, 7 people on school board, staggered terms. So there were 4 people up as I was beginning my third year of my term. And that was a little more contentious because I think people were they were upset about how we handled COVID, which, by the way, we were the first Northern Virginia public school system back in person. But so anyway,
still
that was
good enough, right?
What'd you say?
Still not good enough for some people, though.
So that got a little contentious that year. I think people, there was a little bit more, I think, that then people were a little bit more divided then. But what was also interesting about that time period was that was the first time we saw, in terms of fundraising, money coming in from really outside of Virginia, significant money coming in from PACs to support it. And this was, sort of COVID driven. And, there were stories about this in the news about, more national organizations trying to fund the board. So that was the first time we really saw that. So that would have been, I guess, in 2023, I guess.
Now, did that go into your campaign or just your competitors?
Just my competitors, because I still had 2 more years. But what was interesting was, as a result of that, this local civics organization, they're called Citizens for a Better Community, CVC. It's just a little local thing. They asked subsequent candidates to sign sort of a pledge that they wouldn't take outside money. And so we haven't really seen that since then. In terms of fundraising, I limit fundraising to $100. I don't want people giving me more than $100. Just sort of, I don't want to feel like I have to owe anyone a certain vote or anything. But I'm fine if other people do that. I would like to see, of course, the fundraising try to be focused in Virginia, not seeing, large amounts of money coming from organizations outside of Virginia. But the actual running is not, again, I think if you, it's pretty accessible. I just met today with someone who's running for school board this fall, she moved here about 5 years ago, and this is all new to her, but she wants to take a stab at it. So she sat down with me and asked me questions. And so I think it's great because because you don't need to worry about an endorsement from either party. Anyone can run. Right. You do have to put some money into it. But again, I think if you focus on the good old fashioned door knocking, I think you can do it without having to spend too much money.
Yeah, and I had to, everybody knows I ran in 2021 and in Arlington, and I had to get 125 signatures. That's not unsurmountable. That's doable, and then I had my donate button on my website, and I had a few fundraisers, that type of thing. Right. And I did. I did solicit some of my Naval Academy classmates, and I got some money from them, so that was nice. And old high school friends and things like that. The whole friend and family route, right? So
and that's different than a political action committee, giving you money.
Yeah, these are friends that are just like, go for it, Mike, and run for office. This is great. That's one way to raise some money and everything, just the friends and family round. All right. So we talked a little bit about how you really did run as a true independent and you didn't seek endorsements from the political parties. What do you think about, I'm going to call it the independence movement, and do you know anything about the Forward Party and the Good Party?
Yeah, I know a little bit about them. I feel like they're more on a national level. I do think nationally it makes sense. I liked. I believe it's the Good Party supports. I think kind of provides support, right, to candidates who are. Yeah,
and they only provide support to independent and minor party candidates, and for the viewers, they provide basically free campaign tools, which is really helpful. And, if you really want to dig into the data, voter data and things like that. So it is helpful. And they, it's kind of an endorsement process, but not that formal or anything.
Right. No, and I think that's terrific because someone said to me, well, and it's interesting, I didn't run, originally for school board back in 2019. The reason I ran is someone who was on the school board texted me and said, "You need to run for school board." And I ignored the text. And then she texted me again, "I know you're ignoring me, but you need to run for school board." And and so I think it's one of those things that it can be very overwhelming, and it's out of a lot of people's comfort zones. So I think something like the Good Party, any kind of support you can get, especially if you're not, seeking, if you're an independent and you don't have that support network built in, to have an organization like that can support you is great. And, on the national level, I think it's terrific. It just seems to me that it's politics is far more complicated. Again, that you can't.
And so polarized now, and so vicious in so many ways. And school boards are really getting attacked in many places.
They really are. They really are. And what I've really enjoyed being on the city council is that I've really sort of loving this sort of middle ground that I have. And I, quite often when I was running for city council, people would say, "Well, what," again, sort of the development, "Well, you're not really answering my question." And I said, because I like to really keep an open mind. And actually sometimes I challenge myself to change my mind. So I really try to go into these issues not having a preconceived, thought, and just keeping my mind open. And quite often I will go into an issue with one thought, "Oh, I think we should do this." And by the time I get all the public comment and I hear from my colleagues and then, nope, I change, and so that's what's so freeing about being an independent and not being beholden to either party, is that, you can just do what you think is right. And I think especially with local politics, to me, so data is part of it, but, a lot of it is the people who elected you and listening to what they have to say. So sometimes what they have to say doesn't always maybe match the data, in terms of, sometimes we talk about, nationally what we see and that sort of thing. And it doesn't always work locality. Maybe your locality, maybe the people who elected you don't feel that. So,
well, I think you hit something on the head. You probably heard the adage that, great leaders change their mind, right? So mm-hmm. you get new information, new data, new opinions, and you're willing to change your mind. And we know a lot of people out there that are unwilling to. Now, you may get called a flip-flopper, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it like you got new information and made a more informed decision. That's how I look at it. So
that's right.
So let's go ahead and wrap things up a little bit. So kind of looking into the camera to all the viewers out there, what would you say if someone's just kind of thinking about running for local office?
I think it's incredibly fulfilling, and it's a great mental challenge. And, you're serving your community, and there's nothing better than that, is serving your community. And you do make a difference. And I just love, I thought I would really be intimidated when I was campaigning and door knocking. I love door knocking because you meet so many people and you may disagree with them. They may disagree with you. But to me, that's just what really excites me, is just that exchange of ideas. And, I just think people would really find it eye-opening to hear from people from all walks of life. When I door knock and the mom's got preschoolers who can't wait for her kids to start school, and that's why they moved to this area, is because of our great school system. But then next door to her are, an 80-year-old couple who, are retired, they're on a fixed income, they're worried about taxes, that. So, it's just, to me, it's just a really exciting challenge of balancing all those different needs of our community members. I would really encourage people to consider it, because it's been, local politics, you cannot compare it even to state politics. It's just, it is really, that adage, all politics is local. And I really do believe that. But, again, I see it more as community service than I do politics. So I would really encourage people. It's been a great experience for me.
Yeah, you hit a lot of good things. I also really enjoyed door knocking, and my kids make fun of me because I like talking to strangers a lot, and that's not really their comfort zone, but that's kind of what I like to do. So,
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, but I will say that my boys do have, they're great in terms of, I think it's been a good example for my boys. We have, as I said, we have all boys, 4 boys, but I think it's been a really good example to them. They knew what I went through on school board between COVID and the teachers, approving.
Taking care of your own family too during COVID.
Yeah. And so they knew what I went through. And then when I stepped up to run for city council, I think they were sort of surprised, but then also impressed as well that their mom was willing to give it another try on a different publicly elected body. And for me, it's what's neat about it is since we've been incorporated, there've only been 5 or 6 other individuals who have served on both the school board and the city council. So for me, that's really exciting to be one of just a handful of people who have done that.
So when are you going to run for like state house or state senate?
Yeah, that's actually people have said that to me. But that's where I think it's a little. Our mayor is just elected internally, so the 7 of us are elected, and then we internally elect our mayor. So I think it's different. I'm not sure if I would have the stomach for even state politics. It's just I really like being able to, when I receive letters, because we are small, more than half the time when we get letters or people come, I know who everyone is because we've lived here for 15 years now. And what I've also enjoyed with city council is meeting a lot of the empty nesters and retired folks that I might not have known because we have kids in the school system.
Yeah, so different circles. Yeah, different circles.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So.
All right, Laura, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up here. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully that you'll be an inspiration to everybody out there. So peace.
Well, thank you. And I'm on the website. If anyone ever needs to, my email's on the website. People can contact me if they ever have any questions or need advice or anything. But thanks so much for this opportunity.